Chapter 6. The Artful Dodger. By 8 o'clock, Oliver was nearly 5 miles away from the town, but he ran for a time and then hid for a while in case he was being pursued. Then he sat down to rest beside a milestone and began to think, for the first time, where he could go. The milestone told him, in big letters, that he was now 70 miles from London. The name fixed in his mind and gave him a new idea. London, the big city. Nobody could ever find him there. He had often heard the old men in the workhouse, too, say that no lad with spirit would find it difficult to earn his living in London. As these thoughts passed through his mind, he jumped to his feet and continued walking. Oliver walked 20 miles that day, and all that time tasted nothing but a piece of dry bread. When night came, he turned into a field and soon fell asleep. He felt cold and stiff when he got up the next morning, and so hungry that he had to spend the only penny he had on a small loaf. Another night passed in the cold air made him worse, and when he set out on his journey the next morning, he could hardly move. He continued in this way for 6 days, begging at cottage doors in the villages where it was not forbidden to beg. Early on the 7th morning after he had left his hometown, he walked slowly and painfully into a little place called Barnet. The streets were empty. Not a soul had woken to begin the business of the day. The sun was rising in all its beauty, but the light only served to show the boy his loneliness as he sat, with bleeding feet and covered with dust, on a doorstep. He had been sitting on the doorstep for some time when he noticed that a boy, who had passed him some minutes before, had returned and was now looking at him closely from the opposite side of the street. After a while the boy crossed over and, walking up close to Oliver, said, "Hello, what's the trouble?" The boy who addressed Oliver in this manner was about his own age, but one of the strangest-looking boys Oliver had ever seen. He was a dirty little boy, but he appeared to have all the manners of a man. He was short for his age, with sharp, ugly little eyes. His hat was stuck on the top of his head so lightly that it threatened to fall off at any moment. He wore a man's coat, which reached nearly to his heels. He had turned the arms back, so that he could put his hands in his trouser pockets. He was, all in all, as proud and confident a young gentleman as ever stood 4 feet 6, or something less. "I am very hungry and tired," replied Oliver, with tears in his eyes as he spoke. "I have walked a long way. I have been walking for 7 days." "Walking for 7 days?" said the young gentleman. "You want some food, and you shall have it. I am a poor boy myself, but I have a coin or two, and I'll pay. Get up and come with me." Helping Oliver to rise, this young man took him to a neighbouring shop, where he bought him some meat and a big loaf of bread. Then he took him to a small public house, where a pot of beer was brought to him. "Going to London?" said the strange boy, when Oliver had finally finished his meal. "Yes." "Got anywhere to stay?" "No." "Money?" "No." The strange boy whistled and put his hands into his pockets as far as the long arms of his coat would let them go. "Do you live in London?" inquired Oliver. "Yes, I do, when I'm at home," replied the boy. "I suppose you want a bed for tonight, don't you?" "I do indeed," answered Oliver. "I have not slept under a roof for more than a week." "Don't cry," said the young gentleman. "I've got to be in London tonight. I know a respectable old gentleman who lives there, and he'll give you a bed for nothing if any gentleman he knows introduces you, and he knows me very well." This unexpected offer of shelter was too attractive to resist, especially as it was immediately followed by the assurance that the old gentleman would provide Oliver with a comfortable job, without loss of time. This led to a more friendly conversation between the two boys, from which Oliver discovered that his friend's name was Jack Dawkins, but that among his close friends he was called the Artful Dodger. As Jack Dawkins objected to their entering London before nightfall, it was nearly 11 o'clock when they reached the edge of the city. They passed through one of the ugliest and dirtiest parts of London, until at last they reached the bottom of a hill. Oliver was just wondering whether or not to run away when the Dodger pushed open the door of a house and, pulling him into the passage, closed it behind them. He gave a whistle, and a faint light shone on the wall at the end of the passage. This was followed slowly by a man's face. "There's two of you," said the man, shading his eyes with his hand. "Who's the other one?" "A new friend," replied Jack Dawkins, pulling Oliver forward. "Is Fagin upstairs?" "Yes, he's sorting the handkerchiefs. Go on up." First the light, and then the face disappeared. Oliver, feeling his way with one hand and the other firmly held by his companion, climbed the dark and broken stairs with some difficulty. Jack Dawkins threw open the door of a back room and pulled Oliver in after him. The walls and ceiling of the room were completely black with age and dirt. There was a wooden table in front of the fire, on which were a candle stuck in a beer bottle, 2 or 3 cups, a loaf and butter, and a plate. In a pan on the fire some sausages were cooking. Standing over them was a very old Jew, whose evil-looking face was partly hidden by his thick red hair. He was dressed in a dirty woolen coat, and he seemed to be dividing his attention between the cooking pan and a number of silk handkerchiefs which were hanging on a line. Several rough beds made of old cloths were laid side by side on the floor. Seated round the table were 4 or 5 boys, none older than the Dodger, smoking long clay pipes and drinking spirits with the air of middle-aged men. These crowded round the Dodger as he whispered a few words to the old man, and then turned round and looked at Oliver. The old man turned too. "This is him, Fagin," said the Dodger. "My friend, Oliver Twist." The old man smiled and, making a low bow to Oliver, took him by the hand and hoped he would have the honour of his friendship. Upon this the young gentleman with the pipes approached and shook both his hands very hard, especially the one in which he held his few clothes. "We are very glad to see you, Oliver," said the old man. "Dodger, take off the sausages and pull a chair near the fire for Oliver. Ah, you're looking at the handkerchiefs, eh, my dear? We've just sorted them out, ready for the wash. That's all, Oliver, that's all." The last part of his speech was greeted with a loud shout of laughter from all the pupils of the cheerful old gentleman, and then they all sat down again to eat supper.